Everest. Just saying the name, it kind of sends shivers down your spine, doesn't it? This incredible, massive mountain just sticking way up there. And I bet that for a lot of people, when they picture seeing it in person, what comes to mind is like weeks of intense trekking through snow and ice.
Yeah, you're right. It's that image of the sort of heroic climber battling the elements. And there's some truth to that, of course.
Oh, for sure. But here's the thing. What if I told you that actually climbing Everest, or even making that trek to base camp, isn't the only way you can see it? Today, we're going to talk about all the maybe surprisingly accessible ways you can actually see the world's tallest mountain. And we're going to be drawing on the knowledge of David Ways, a Nepal guidebook author who really knows his stuff.
Yeah, David's work is great for this because he shows just how many different experiences are out there. It's not just one way to do it. He breaks it down by things like, how much time you've got, how much effort you're up for, and most importantly, I think, what kind of view you're really hoping to get.
Exactly. And he kind of categorizes them as, the easiest ways, the best ways, and then some other cool options within Nepal. He even talks about ways to see it from Tibet.
So think of this as like your personal Everest spotting guide, whether you've got a free morning or a couple of weeks to spare. Yeah. And it's not just about ticking a box like, seen Everest, done that. It's more about understanding what each option actually involves.
Exactly.
So let's jump right in, and we'll start with what David calls the easiest ways to see Everest if you're in Nepal.
Right. And these are especially great for people who maybe don't have loads of time or maybe aren't super into intense trekking. They still give you a fantastic introduction to how majestic the Himalayas are.
For sure. So first up, we've got the Everest flight. Now, this sounds pretty cool. It's a special flight just for this, and it lasts about 45 to 60 minutes. It takes off right from Kathmandu, takes you up to a pretty impressive 20,000 feet. And David rates it very easy, difficulty-wise, though he does say it'll pretty much take up your whole morning. Yeah, I mean, what's really amazing about this is how quickly you go from the city, the hustle and bustle of Kathmandu, to soaring amongst these enormous mountains. And being at 20,000 feet, you're really kind of on par with some of these incredible peaks. I mean, can you imagine looking out the window and seeing these giants right there?
That must be amazing. And the best part, according to David, is that from these small planes, and he says they're usually only seating like 8 to 12 people, you actually come eye to eye with Everest. That's got to be a view that sticks with you, right?
Oh, absolutely.
And of course, he's got some handy tips for you. First off, he says morning flights are definitely the way to go for the clearest views.
Yeah, that makes sense. The air tends to be much clearer and more stable early in the day, before the heat kicks in, you start getting haze or cloud cover.
Yeah. He also recommends, and this is interesting, to actually plan for 2 days, just in case your flight gets delayed or even canceled because of weather. He says that's not uncommon, but the airlines are usually good about refunds.
Good to know.
He also mentions that, monsoon season, probably not the ideal time to try and catch this flight. So even though there's that risk of cancellation, he still gives this option a 10 out of 10. He calls it a fantastic, low-effort way to see Everest. Now, what do you think about that rating, given that it's so weather-dependent?
It's tricky, right? Because, the possibility of cancellation is a definite downside. Can you imagine getting all excited and then having to turn back? But then again, if the flight does happen, being able to see Everest that close, that easily, well, it is pretty unique. It earns a high score for, pure accessibility, I'd say.
Yeah.
It's perfect if you want a direct view without needing a ton of time or being super fit.
Okay, yeah, it makes sense. So moving on to another option in this easiest category, we've got Nagarkot. This sounds like a more down-to-earth kind of experience, both literally and figuratively. David describes it as an easy walk to a viewing platform. It's not too far from Kathmandu, near a place called Bhaktapur. And you'd basically spend a night and a day there, so you can catch both the sunrise and sunset views. It's at a pretty comfy altitude, 2,192 meters, and the difficulty is easy. So pretty accessible.
Yeah, Nagarkot's been a popular spot for ages. Locals and tourists love it because it's so easy to get to from the Kathmandu Valley, and it gives you those wide panoramic views of the Himalayas. It's classic for a reason.
And the cost is pretty reasonable, too. Ranges from, $20 to $120 or more, depending on what kind of accommodation you go for, I guess.
Yeah.
The main attraction is obviously seeing that incredible Himalayan range all lit up at sunrise and sunset. And David says you can get there pretty easily by taxi or bus. There are also lots of organized tours if that's more your thing. But And this is a pretty big, but while you'll see those stunning Himalayas, Everest itself is usually just a teeny tiny dot on the horizon.
Ah, that's important to know. You'll definitely get a magnificent view of snow-capped peaks, which is amazing in itself. But if you're, dead set on picking out Everest clearly, maybe getting that classic photo, you might be a bit disappointed with Nagarkot. It's more about experiencing the Himalayas as a whole, the whole panorama.
Yeah, totally. And that's reflected in David's rating. He says it's good if you're pressed for time and just want to see the Himalayas, but it's not a perfect 10 for actually seeing Everest itself. He also mentions that the lookout tower in the morning can get super crowded, which I can imagine can be a bit of a pain. Have you ever been to one of those viewpoints where everyone's like jostling to get the perfect shot?
Oh, yeah, all the time. I mean, it's the trade-off you make with places that are easy to get to and have amazing views. The view is stunning, but you're sharing it with a ton of other people, and that can sometimes, ruin the mood a bit. It's something to consider if you're someone who prefers a more peaceful, solitary experience in nature.
Yeah, I totally get that. So next we've got the Dulikel hike. Now, this is similar to Nagarkot. It's a nice and easy walk with those Himalayan views. Again, you'd probably want to spend at least a night and a day there to catch both sunrise and sunset. Altitude's even lower, just 5,550 meters, and it's rated easy, so very doable. And the cost is pretty comparable to Nagarkot, maybe like 25 to 80 bucks or thereabouts.
Dulikel's got a bit of a different vibe, though. There's more of a focus on experiencing the local Newari culture there. It's a cute town with its own charm. It's not just about the mountains.
Okay, cool. So the draw here is that mix of culture and those great views. But again, like Nagarkot, Everest is probably going to be just a tiny dot in the distance. Getting there is easy enough by taxi or bus, though it's maybe not as popular as Nagarkot for those all-inclusive tour packages. David mentions some cool old temples in the area and recommends a sunrise hike for the best mountain views. But once again, the rating suggests it's great for a Himalayan experience and checking out the town, but not the best if seeing Everest is your main goal. It's starting to sound like these easiest options are really more about enjoying the Himalayas as a whole, rather than zeroing in on that one super famous peak.
Yeah, exactly. They're all about accessibility and beautiful scenery, but if you're after that unmistakable silhouette of Everest, that classic shot, you'll probably want to look at something a bit more, involved.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, and the last one in this easy category is Chandragiri Hills. Now, this is a newer option, only opened in 2016. It's a privately run cable car that takes you up to those Himalayan viewpoints. Perfect for a day trip if the weather cooperates, of course. Starts in Kathmandu, and the top station is at 2,551 meters, so nice and high. The difficulty is easy, though David does point out that there can be issues with haze, clarity, and overall weather conditions. I mean, a cable car ride up to the mountains does sound pretty appealing, doesn't it?
It does. It's a super convenient way to get up high and access those views without having to hike or anything. It's like the modern way to enjoy the mountains, right?
Yeah. Exactly. And the price isn't too bad, around 22 bucks for a round-trip cable car ticket. Plus, you've got to factor in transport to get there, which could be anything from 10 to 50 bucks or even more. The main attractions are obviously the cable car ride itself and the Baleshwar Mahadev temple up at the top. But, and this is a bit of a theme with these easier options, Everest is really only visible as a tiny speck, and only on those super, super clear days. Even then, you'll probably want some binoculars. You will see the Himalayan range from afar, though, which is still pretty awesome.
Yeah, the weather really is the big unknown with these mountain views. And when you're trying to spot something as far away as Everest, it's got to be exceptionally clear. No clouds, no haze, nothing.
For sure. And getting there could be a bit of a trek in itself, apparently. You can take a local bus, which takes longer, or go for a private taxi, or even join a tour. David actually provides a link to their website, which is handy. He also points out that there's quite a difference in pricing for non-Nepalists, something to be aware of. So the rating reflects all of this. It's a cool cable car ride with nice mountain views, but very weather dependent, and actually seeing Everest is a bit of a long shot. So yeah, it seems like if you want a really satisfying view of Everest, you're probably going to have to put in a bit more effort than these easiest options allow. So let's move on to what David considers the best ways to see Mount Everest in Nepal. Now things are getting serious.
Right. These are for people who are up for a bit more of a challenge physically and time-wise, but they offer much more immersive and rewarding encounters with Everest.
Okay, so topping the list in this best category is the one most people probably think of straight away, the Everest Base Camp Trek. This is the legendary trek that takes you all the way to the base camp used by those hardcore climbers who are attempting to summit. It's a big commitment, at least 12 days, starting with that super memorable flight into Lukla and then trekking through all those iconic Sherpa villages and valleys. The highest point you reach is a pretty impressive 5,545 meters at Kalapathar, and the difficulty is rated as moderate to hard. Wow, 12 days. That's a proper adventure.
It is. But the Everest Base Camp trek isn't just about, ticking off a destination. It's about the whole journey through the heart of the Khumbu Valley. You experience the unique Sherpa culture, you trek through some seriously stunning landscapes, and the whole time the anticipation is building as these towering peaks gradually come into view.
Yeah, I can only imagine. And the cost for this trek is usually between $1,300 and $1,600 or maybe even more. There are loads of highlights like that crazy flight to Lukla with its famously short runway and all those incredible viewpoints you pass along the way. But David really emphasizes that the absolute best, most iconic views of Everest are from the climb up Kalapathar. Wait, Kalapathar. That's not actually at base camp itself.
You got it. Reaching Everest Base Camp is a huge achievement, but the views from there are actually a bit obstructed. So climbing Kalapathar, which is this dark peak right next to base camp, is a must. It gives you that classic, unobstructed panorama of Everest, including its impressive south face. It's totally worth the extra effort.
Okay, good to know. So David's rating for the Everest Base Camp trek is pretty simple and to the point. He calls it a classic trek and the best way to experience Everest. Pretty strong statement.
Yeah, it is. It's a tough one physically, but the sense of accomplishment you get from it, being so close to Everest and the whole immersive experience, it all makes it super rewarding for those who take it on.
Next on the best list is the Gokyo trek. This one's described as a slightly shorter trek, around 11 days or more, and it offers spectacular, and this is key, different angled views of Everest. You actually get to see more of the mountain than you typically do on the EBC trek. It also starts with that Lukla flight and then heads directly north to the Gokyo Valley. Highest point is 5,357 meters at Gokyo itself. Difficulty is moderate to hard, so still up there, and the cost is similar to the EBC trek, around $1,300 to $1,500. 11 days is still a pretty decent chunk of time out there.
Yeah, but the Gokyo Valley is something else. It gives you a unique, and many would argue, an even more dramatic perspective of the Everest Massif. You're looking at Everest from the west, so you see more of its profile, along with its neighboring peaks like Lhotse and Makalu. And then you've got the stunning Gokyo lakes, these turquoise, high-altitude lakes, which just add another layer of beauty to the whole trek. It's a seriously breathtaking region.
So the highlights are, well, that unforgettable Lukla flight, obviously. Then the amazing view from the top of Gokyo, plus there's the chance to do some side trips to those beautiful ice lakes you mentioned. David even says that Gokyo is often considered better for getting those iconic Everest photos, and the trails tend to be a bit less crowded than the main EBC route. And his rating, he calls it the best views of Everest. Another strong endorsement.
For sure. If you're all about getting those amazing photos and you prefer a slightly quieter trekking experience with arguably better, more comprehensive views of Everest, then the Gokyo retrek is a fantastic option.
Awesome. And last but certainly not least, in the best category is the Three Passes trek. Now, this sounds like the ultimate Everest trekking adventure. It's basically a combo of the best parts of both the EBC and Gokyo retreks all rolled into one mega trek.
Yeah.
But it's a bigger time commitment, 17 days or more. You fly into Lukla, trek to Everest Base Camp, tackle a bunch of high-altitude passes, then you hit those awesome viewpoints at Gokyo before finally looping back to Lukla. The highest point you hit is a challenging 5,643 meters, and the difficulty is rated as challenging hard, so no messing around here. The cost also higher, as you expect, ranging from about $1,500 to $1,800 or more. 17 days. You really have to be dedicated to take this one on.
Oh yeah, the Three Passes trek is definitely for experienced adventurous trekkers. It's demanding, but it takes you through some unbelievably diverse landscapes, and you get so many different perspectives on the entire Everest range.
Yeah.
You're basically seeing it from all the best angles.
Wow. And the highlights are basically everything, right? The Lukla flight, the trek to EBC, the thrill of crossing those high passes, those amazing views from Gokyo, and completing a full loop of the whole Everest region. David emphasizes that while it's definitely not easy, the rewards are huge. Things stunning views and incredible mountain scenery for, well, over 2 weeks. His rating for this one, the best of all Everest treks if you have the time. It sounds unforgettable, even if it's going to be pretty tough going.
Totally. It's the most comprehensive and immersive way to experience the Everest region, hands down. The sheer number of breathtaking viewpoints is hard to beat.
Okay, so we've covered the easiest ways, we've covered the best ways. Now let's move on to what David calls the other ways you can see Mount Everest while you're in Nepal. These seem like some cool alternatives if you have specific interests or maybe just don't have the time for those longer treks.
Right. These are the less well-known routes, the paths less traveled, and they come with different trade-offs, like how much time you need, how much effort it takes, and what kind of view of Everest you'll actually get.
First up, we've got Warsaw and Namche. David describes this as basically a shortcut version of the Everest Base Camp trek, a quick 2-day trek where you can catch a distant glimpse of Everest. The total trip is around 3 to 4 days, including that flight to Lukla, and then you trek through the first few villages, Pating, Warsaw, and then the busy Sherpa town of Namche Bazaar. Highest point is 3,880 meters. Difficulty is moderate, so not too bad. And the cost is about $400 or more. So you get a taste of the trekking experience without having to commit to the whole thing.
Yeah, it's a great sampler. You get to see the early parts of the trail, soak up the atmosphere in Namche Bazaar, get a feel for the Sherpa culture.
And the highlights are, of course, that exciting flight to Lukla and, as David points out, a couple of distant views of Everest, one after you leave your sail, and another one a bit closer near the Everest View Hotel. Though he does ask, kind of rhetorically, I think, why would you come all this way without going all the way? And his rating reflects that. 2 distant views and a taste of trekking. But it might not feel worth it, considering the effort to get to Lukla in the first place. What do you think? Is a distant glimpse enough for some people?
That's tough to say. It really depends. For some people, especially those who are really limited on time or maybe have some physical limitations, a distant view might be enough. They still get the experience of going to Lukla and seeing the foothills of Everest. But I think for a lot of people, once they've made the journey that far, seeing Everest up close is just too tempting to pass up.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, next we've got the Pikey Peak trek. This one sounds pretty interesting. It's a historic trek, and it gives you this unique view of both the Everest and Annapurna Mountain ranges from the same spot. Now that's cool. It's a longer trek though, 6 to 9 days, starting with a drive to Jiri and then trekking up to Pikey Peak. Highest point is 4,068 meters. Difficulty, moderate. And the cost is between $500 and $800. Seeing both Everest and Annapurna from one place, that's got to be special.
Oh, it's incredible. The Pikey Peak trek is a different kind of adventure. It takes you through more rural, less visited parts of Nepal. And seeing those 2 massive mountain ranges, the 2 highest in the world, from a single spot, it's really quite rare. It makes this trek really stand out.
Yeah, that's amazing. So the highlights for this one are experiencing that rural Nepali life, staying in those traditional tea houses, getting away from the crowds a bit, and obviously that panoramic view of Everest and Annapurna. David also mentions the Thupten Choling Monastery, which sounds like a significant site. He notes that the road to Jiri has actually been improved, so the drive there is a bit easier now, and he recommends hiring a local guide who knows the area well. The rating suggests it's a good option for people who want a less intense trek, more of a historical and cultural experience, and of course that unique double mountain range view. It's a great alternative for people who want something a bit off the beaten path.
It definitely appeals to a different kind of traveler, someone who values the journey, the cultural immersion, as much as seeing the mountains themselves. It's about experiencing Nepal as a whole, with those amazing peaks as a bonus.
Awesome. And the last option in this other category is, wait for it, the helicopter flight. Now this is described as a very fancy, very luxurious way to get super close to Mount Everest, similar to the fixed-wing flight, but way more exclusive and flexible. The flight itself is only about an hour from Kathmandu. And the difficulty, well, it's very easy. You just sit back and enjoy the ride. However, the cost is a bit of a jump. It ranges from $5,000 to $10,000 for a private helicopter, or $350 to $700 if you're willing to share with others. Imagine a helicopter ride right next to Everest. It's a once-in-a-lifetime kind of thing, if you can swing it, that is.
It really is. The helicopter gives you this unbelievable level of closeness and flexibility. You can get so close to Everest, which means incredible photo opportunities, and some tours even include landings at these high-altitude viewpoints, so you can really experience it up close and personal.
Wow. Yeah, that's pretty unbeatable. So the main things that make this option special are that close-up view and the better photo ops compared to the plane. David says morning flights are best, and he suggests sharing the cost with a few people if you can, to make it more affordable. And he points out that photography is generally easier from a helicopter. He even has a tip about trying to book the flight in person when you're there, rather than online, as that might save you some cash. But like with those fixed-wing flights, the weather plays a big role, so you need to be flexible with your schedule. The rating. He simply calls it the premium way to see Everest. He does mention these even more expensive helicopter flights that go all the way to Kalapathar near EBC, but he warns about the risk of altitude sickness with such a rapid ascent.
Yeah, that makes sense. Going from sea level to that altitude so quickly can be risky if you're not acclimatized.
Definitely. So it seems like the helicopter option really comes down to your budget and how much you prioritize getting that ultimate close-up view without having to trek for days and days. It's a splurge for sure, but I can imagine it'd be an amazing experience.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've pretty much covered all the bases as far as Nepal goes. Now, let's talk briefly about seeing Everest from Tibet. David does remind us that you absolutely need special permits to get into Tibet.
Right, yeah. The Tibetan side of Everest has a whole different set of rules and logistics to consider, and permits are the biggest hurdle for people traveling independently.
Okay, so first up is the overland route from Nepal to Tibet. Now, this only gives you a very quick glimpse of Everest, and it's part of a much longer journey. The whole trip is around 8 days, but you only get about 30 minutes at a specific viewpoint to actually see Everest. The difficulty is easy, and the cost is somewhere between $600 and $1,200. The highlight is that short stop for a photo op, if the weather's playing nice, that is. David's rating is pretty blunt. He says it's not worth it if you're just going to see Everest. It sounds like Everest is more of a bonus on this trip than the main attraction.
Yeah, exactly. The overland journey to Tibet is a whole experience in itself, with its own culture and sights to see. The Everest view is really just a quick stop along the way.
Gotcha. Okay, the second option from Tibet is getting to Everest Base Camp on the north side. This usually involves either flying or taking a train to Lhasa and then driving most of the way to a starting point, followed by a pretty short one-day trek to base camp. The starting point mentioned is Lhasa, and the altitude at base camp is 5,200 meters with a moderate difficulty rating. The cost is estimated to be around $800 to $1,000, not including those necessary permits and the cost of getting to Lhasa in the first place. The main attraction here is being up close to the Tibetan side of Everest, experiencing it from a different angle. But David points out that although it might seem easier and cheaper at first, there's actually a lot more travel involved overall. You've got to deal with the hassle of getting permits, and you have to travel with a government-organized tour. No going solo on this one. He also mentions that spending a big chunk of the journey in a Jeep kind of takes away from that sense of accomplishment you get when you trek in from the Nepal side. So his rating suggests it's worth considering if you're already planning to do a tour that goes from Tibet to Nepal, but otherwise the logistics can be a bit of a nightmare.
Yeah, the Tibetan side definitely offers a different perspective on Everest and the surrounding landscape. But because of those stricter travel rules and the whole nature of the approach, it's just not as straightforward an option, especially for international travelers who are mainly interested in seeing Everest.
Makes sense. And finally, we can't talk about seeing Everest without mentioning the ultimate way to do it, actually climbing the thing. This involves either trekking or flying to base camp and then doing an incredibly challenging multi-week ascent to the summit, though the whole expedition can take around 3 months to complete. Starting point is Kathmandu. Summit is at a mind-blowing 8,848 meters. Difficulty, well, it's extreme. No surprises there. And the cost is, yeah, you guessed it, extreme too. Anywhere from $75,000 to $120,000. The ultimate highlight. Being on top of the world, of course. David wisely advises that climbing Everest is not something to be taken lightly at all, and his rating is pretty straightforward. There's no better way to see Everest up close. So while this is definitely the most direct way to experience Everest, it's obviously something that's only possible for a very, very select few and incredibly skilled climbers.
Totally. Climbing Everest is the ultimate goal for many mountaineers. It gives you the most up-close and personal encounter with the mountain imaginable, but it comes with huge risks, it takes years of training, and you need serious financial resources. It's an incredible feat, that's for sure.
So there you have it. We've gone from scenic flights to intense multi-day treks, and even touched on the idea of standing right on the top of the world. Now, to make things a bit easier, based on all of this amazing info from David Ways, he actually gives his top 4 picks for seeing Everest. Coming in at number 4 is the mountain flight. Great for an easy, surprisingly up-close aerial view. Number 3 is the Everest Base Camp Trek, the classic, iconic trekking experience. Then, in second place, we have the Gokyo Retrek, which he loves for the best overall views and photo opportunities. And his number 1 pick, the best of the best for that ultimate immersive experience, is the 3 High Passes Trek.
It's a great list because it really sums up the different options based on what you prioritize. Whether it's ease and speed, that classic trek, the perfect photo, or just a really comprehensive exploration of the Everest region, there's something for everyone.
I know, it's amazing to think about all the different ways there are to witness this incredible mountain. Hopefully this has given you, our listeners, a better idea of what's out there and got you thinking about which option might be right for you, depending on your interests, budget, and fitness level. If you want to dive deeper and get even more detailed info, David Weiss has some fantastic guidebooks on Nepal, and his website is called The Longest Way Home. He's a great resource. So thanks for joining us today as we explored all the different ways you can reach the world's highest peak. And as you think about these amazing journeys, maybe it makes you think about all the other adventures we take in life, both the physical ones and the ones that happen in our minds and hearts, the things that lead us to those moments that make us feel truly awestruck and alive.
That's a great point to end on.
Thanks for joining us today. We'll see you next time for another look at something amazing.
See you then.